Unbelievable! A flight attendant just slapped a passenger. But this wasn't just any mid-air meltdown. The man she struck held a secret that would detonate her entire world. What happens when a moment of fury meets the owner of the skies? Prepare for a story you have to see to believe. The cabin air, usually a hum of recycled oxygen and hushed conversations, crackled with a barely perceptible tension. Flight 316 to New York was nearing its cruising altitude, the seatbelt signs had just blinked off, and a collective sigh of settling in rippled through the passengers. Among them, in a seemingly ordinary economy seat towards the front, sat Mr. Alistair Blackwood. To the casual observer, he was just another traveler, perhaps a businessman catching a red-eye, his tailored suit slightly rumpled from the initial bustle of boarding. His dark hair, flecked with distinguished silver at the temples, was neatly combed, and his eyes, usually sharp and commanding in the boardroom, held a weariness masked by an air of quiet contemplation as he gazed out the window at the cottony clouds drifting below. Unbeknownst to almost everyone on board, Alistair Blackwood wasn't just any passenger. He was the founder and CEO of Global Air, the very airline they were currently soaring through the skies on. He often took unannounced flights, a habit born out of a desire to stay connected to the operational realities of his company, to experience firsthand what his passengers and crew encountered daily. Today, however, his incognito journey was about to take a dramatically unexpected turn. Down the aisle, her smile as bright and polished as her name tag, walked Clara Hayes. Clara was a senior flight attendant with Global Air, known among her colleagues for her efficiency, her warm demeanor with passengers, and a no-nonsense attitude when it came to maintaining order and safety. She took immense pride in her job, viewing it not just as a profession but as a responsibility to ensure the comfort and well-being of everyone under her care during their flight. Today had started like any other, the pre-flight checks, the welcoming of passengers, the safety demonstrations delivered with practiced ease. But as the flight progressed, a series of minor inconveniences had begun to fray her usually unflappable composure. A delayed catering delivery meant some passengers hadn't received their preferred meals, a malfunctioning overhead bin had caused a brief kerfuffle, and now, a particularly insistent passenger in the economy section was repeatedly pressing his call button with what seemed like trivial requests. It was this last point that was currently drawing Clara's attention towards the front of the cabin, towards the unassuming figure by the window. Alistair had pressed the call button not out of impatience, but out of a genuine concern. He had noticed a young mother a few rows behind him struggling with an overtired toddler. Remembering the complimentary children's activity packs Global Air used to offer, he had hoped to request one from the crew. He wanted to observe how his airline catered to families, a demographic he felt was increasingly important. However, his simple request was about to be misconstrued in a way neither he nor Clara could have anticipated. As Clara approached his seat, her initial professional smile was already a little strained. She had dealt with several demanding passengers already, and the persistent buzz from this particular call button had led her to expect another minor, perhaps slightly entitled, request. Her mind was already formulating a polite yet firm response about prioritizing urgent needs. As she leaned down to address Alistair, her focus was less on his face and more on preempting what she assumed would be another trivial demand. "Yes, sir? How can I help you?" she asked, her tone polite but carrying a hint of underlying weariness. Alistair turned from the window, his expression calm and courteous. "Excuse me," he began, his voice a low, measured baritone. "I noticed a mother a few rows back struggling with her little one. I was wondering if you still have those children's activity packs available?" Before he could finish his sentence, Clara's already heightened stress level seemed to reach a breaking point. From her perspective, another passenger making a non-essential request while she was dealing with other issues felt like an added burden. Misinterpreting his calm demeanor as indifference to her workload, and perhaps fueled by the cumulative frustrations of the flight, a spark of irritation ignited within her. Without fully processing his words, and jumping to the conclusion that he was simply another demanding passenger, Clara's patience snapped. In a moment that would alter the course of both their lives, a surge of exasperation overtook her professional training. Her hand, moving with a speed born of frustration, connected sharply with Alistair's cheek. The sound, though not deafening, was starkly audible in the relative quiet of the cabin. A gasp rippled through the nearby passengers. Alistair himself was stunned. His hand instinctively went to his cheek, his eyes widening in disbelief. The weariness he had felt moments before was instantly replaced by a cold shock. Clara, in the immediate aftermath of her impulsive action, froze. The realization of what she had just done began to dawn on her, her initial irritation giving way to a dawning horror. The bright smile vanished, replaced by a look of utter dismay. The air in the cabin thickened, the hum replaced by a stunned silence, all eyes now fixed on the unexpected drama unfolding in the forward economy section. This wasn't just turbulence, it was a full-blown shockwave. The immediate aftermath of the slap was a tableau of frozen expressions. Passengers nearby had ceased their reading, their conversations abruptly cut short, their gazes locked onto the unfolding scene with a mixture of shock and morbid curiosity. Clara stood as if rooted to the spot, her hands still slightly outstretched, the adrenaline of her impulsive act beginning to recede, replaced by a chilling wave of regret. Her breath caught in her throat, and the carefully constructed professional mask she usually wore shattered, revealing a raw and panicked vulnerability. The vibrant energy that usually radiated from her was now extinguished, leaving her pale and trembling slightly. The weight of what she had done pressed down on her, heavy and undeniable. Alistair, for his part, remained seated, his hand still resting on his now slightly reddened cheek. His initial shock was quickly being replaced by a complex swirl of emotions, disbelief, a flicker of anger, but also a strange sense of bewilderment. He had flown countless times on his own airline, interacting with hundreds of flight attendants over the years, and nothing remotely like this had ever occurred. He was a man accustomed to respect, not through demanding it, but through the authority inherent in his position and the generally courteous nature of professional interactions. This blatant act of physical aggression, seemingly unprovoked, was jarringly out of sync with his experiences. The silence in the immediate vicinity stretched, each passing second amplifying the awkwardness and the gravity of the situation. A few passengers began to whisper amongst themselves, their hushed tones adding to the surreal atmosphere. Another flight attendant, noticing the commotion, began to make her way towards the scene, her brow furrowed with concern. The young mother Alistair had intended to help looked on with wide, frightened eyes, her toddler momentarily forgetting his fussing in the face of the unexpected drama. Breaking the silence, Alistair slowly lowered his hand. His gaze, which had initially held surprise, now fixed on Clara. There was no immediate fury in his eyes, rather a deep, assessing look, as if he were trying to understand the inexplicable. "Madam," he began, his voice surprisingly calm, a low rumble that nonetheless carried an undeniable authority. "May I ask what that was for?" His composure, in stark contrast to Clara's visible distress, seemed to heighten the tension in the air. Clara finally found her voice, though it was shaky and barely above a whisper. I am so sorry," she stammered, her eyes wide with a dawning horror. I misunderstood. You kept pressing the call button, and I was already stressed, and I reacted badly. Terribly badly." Her words tumbled out in a rush, an inadequate explanation for her impulsive action. The color drained from her face as the full weight of her transgression began to sink in. Assaulting a passenger was a serious offense, one that could have severe consequences for her career. Alistair listened intently, his expression still unreadable. He could sense her genuine distress, but the act itself remained perplexing. He had simply wanted to help a fellow passenger. The misunderstanding, fueled by stress, had escalated to a physical altercation. This was not the level of service or professionalism he expected from his crew. It also highlighted a potential issue within the operational environment. Were his flight attendants under undue pressure? Were there communication breakdowns happening on his flights? His mind, even in this personally shocking moment, began to analyze the situation from a broader, corporate perspective. The approaching flight attendant, a younger woman named Sarah, reached their row, her eyes darting between Clara and Alistair. "What's going on here?" she asked, her voice a blend of concern and professional inquiry. Clara could only shake her head, tears welling up in her eyes. I messed up," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Alistair, seeing Clara's obvious distress and the growing attention from the other passengers, decided to de-escalate the immediate situation. "It was a misunderstanding," he stated, his voice firm but without anger. He looked at Sarah. "Perhaps you could assist the mother with the child a few rows back? She seemed to be having a bit of a time." He then turned back to Clara, his gaze still intense. "We will discuss this further." His words hung in the air, carrying a weight that went beyond a simple statement. Clara felt a fresh wave of anxiety wash over her. Discuss this further. It sounded ominous, final. Her mind raced, imagining the potential repercussions: a formal complaint, suspension, even termination. Her career, the job she loved and had dedicated years to, flashed before her eyes, now potentially hanging precariously in the balance due to a moment of uncontrolled frustration. The silence that followed Alistair's words was heavy with unspoken consequences, the weight of the unexpected turbulence settling heavily in the cabin. Sarah, the other flight attendant, quickly assessed the situation and, with a professional nod to Alistair, headed towards the young mother. Her prompt action helped to diffuse some of the immediate tension, shifting the focus, at least for the nearby passengers, to a more sympathetic scene. Clara remained frozen, her gaze fixed on Alistair, a silent plea for understanding in her tear-filled eyes. Alistair, however, had turned his attention back to the window, his expression now a mask of thoughtful contemplation. The initial shock had passed, replaced by a deeper consideration of the incident and its implications. He wasn't a man prone to rash decisions, despite the swiftness with which he had built his airline empire. Alistair believed in gathering all the facts, understanding the context, before taking action. While the physical act of being slapped was undeniably jarring, he was also astute enough to recognize that Clara's reaction likely stemmed from more than just his call button. Her immediate apology, her visible distress, suggested a moment of lost control rather than malicious intent. This didn't excuse her actions, but it did pique his curiosity. What had led a seemingly professional flight attendant to such an uncharacteristic outburst? He subtly observed Clara. She hadn't moved, her shoulders slumped slightly, her gaze still fixed in his general direction, though she didn't dare to make direct eye contact. He could sense her fear, the palpable anxiety radiating from her. It was a stark contrast to the confident and efficient demeanor flight attendants usually projected. This discrepancy intrigued him further. Was she simply having a bad day? Or was there something more systemic at play within the airline's operational environment that was contributing to such stress? Alistair decided to break the strained silence. Turning slightly towards Clara, his voice was calm and measured. "Please take a seat in the jump seat there." He gestured towards the fold-down seat near the forward lavatory. "Collect yourself? We will talk when the initial service rush is over." His tone was neither accusatory nor dismissive, but rather carried a quiet authority that Clara instinctively obeyed. She nodded mutely, her legs feeling weak, and moved to the designated seat, sinking into it with a sigh that was barely audible. As Clara tried to compose herself, Alistair turned his attention to the in-flight magazine, though his mind was far from the glossy pages. He was replaying the brief interaction in his head, trying to understand Clara's perspective. He knew the job of a flight attendant was often more demanding than it appeared. Long hours, dealing with a diverse range of personalities, ensuring safety while maintaining a semblance of calm and hospitality. Could the pressures of the job have contributed to Clara's loss of composure? Meanwhile, the news of the brief altercation had begun to subtly spread through the cabin. Passengers who had witnessed the slap whispered to their neighbors, their versions of the event likely already becoming slightly embellished. The atmosphere remained subtly charged, an undercurrent of curiosity and speculation flowing beneath the surface of the routine flight. Some passengers glanced discreetly at Alistair, wondering who he was and what would happen next. None of them, of course, had any inkling of his true identity. To them, he was just another passenger who had been on the receiving end of an inexplicable act of aggression. As the beverage service began, Sarah and the other flight attendants moved through the aisles, their professional smiles firmly back in place, though there was a noticeable air of caution in their movements near the front of the economy section. They had all witnessed the incident, and the unusual sight of a colleague seemingly assaulting a passenger had left them unsettled. They exchanged worried glances, wondering about the fate of Clara and the nature of the passenger involved. Alistair accepted a cup of black coffee when offered, his eyes scanning the cabin as the service progressed. He observed the interactions between the crew and the passengers, the small courtesies, the occasional moments of minor frustration. He was seeing his airline through a different lens today, not from the sterile environment of his executive suite, but from the perspective of a passenger caught in an unexpected incident. This first-hand experience, though unpleasant, was proving to be unexpectedly insightful. Once the initial service had concluded and the cabin settled into a more relaxed rhythm, Alistair signaled to Sarah. "Could you please ask the flight attendant who was assisting me earlier to come speak with me when she is free?" he requested, his tone polite but firm. Sarah nodded, her expression carefully neutral, and went to find Clara. Clara, sitting in the jump seat, had been wrestling with a maelstrom of emotions: shame, fear, confusion. The brief respite had done little to calm her racing thoughts. When Sarah approached her, her heart sank. "The passenger wants to speak with you," Sarah said quietly, her eyes filled with a mixture of sympathy and concern. Clara took a deep breath, the gravity of the situation weighing heavily on her. She knew this conversation would likely determine her future with Global Air. Little did she know, the man she had slapped held the power to shape that future in ways she couldn't possibly imagine. The unseen power was about to reveal itself. Clara approached Alistair's seat with a trepidatious gait, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. The color had returned to her face, but it was a pale, almost ashen hue. Her eyes, though, held a raw sincerity, reflecting the turmoil within her. She stopped a respectful distance from his aisle seat, waiting for him to acknowledge her. Alistair looked up from the in-flight magazine, his gaze direct but not unkind. He gestured to the empty seat beside him. "Please sit down," he said, his voice still carrying that calm authority. Clara hesitated for a moment, then gratefully accepted the invitation, settling into the seat with a quiet rustle. The proximity felt both unnerving and somehow a relief. "Mr. I don't even know your name," Clara began, her voice barely above a whisper, laced with a profound sense of shame. "I am so incredibly sorry for what happened. There is no excuse for my behavior. The stress of the flight, it wasn't your fault. I reacted completely inappropriately." Her words were rushed, as if she needed to get them out before her courage failed her entirely. Alistair listened patiently, his gaze steady. When she had finished, he nodded slowly. "My name is Alistair," he said simply. "Alistair Blackwood." Clara's eyes widened slightly. The name sounded familiar, important, but in her current state of anxiety, she couldn't immediately place it. "Mr. Blackwood," she repeated, the name feeling weighty on her tongue. "I understand if you want to file a complaint. I will accept any disciplinary action the airline deems necessary." Her voice was resigned, the fight seemingly gone out of her. She knew she had crossed the line. Alistair leaned back slightly in his seat, studying her. "Clara," he said, using her name from her badge. "You said you were stressed. Can you elaborate on that?" He wasn't looking for excuses, but rather trying to understand the context that had led to such an unusual event. Clara hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath. "It's been a difficult day," she admitted. "We were short-staffed on the ground, which led to a delayed departure. Then the catering issue, and the malfunctioning overhead bin, and then, yes, a few passengers with constant requests. It all just piled up. But that still doesn't excuse my reaction to you. You were simply trying to be kind." Her voice cracked slightly on the last sentence, the realization of her misjudgment hitting her anew. Alistair absorbed this information, Short staffing, logistical issues, demanding passengers, these were all too familiar challenges in the airline industry. But they should not, under any circumstances, lead to a flight attendant physically assaulting a passenger. Yet he could also sense the genuine remorse in Clara's voice. "Tell me about your job, Clara," Alistair asked, his tone shifting slightly, becoming less interrogative and more conversational. "What do you find most challenging? What do you enjoy the most?" He wanted to see beyond this single, regrettable incident and understand the person beneath the uniform. Clara looked at him, slightly surprised by the change in direction. But she answered honestly. "The most challenging part is definitely managing expectations and dealing with frustrated passengers, especially when things go wrong, delays, lost luggage, things that are often beyond our control. But I truly enjoy the interaction with people, making them feel comfortable and safe. There's a real satisfaction in knowing you've made someone's journey a little bit better." A flicker of her usual warmth returned as she spoke about the positive aspects of her job. Alistair listened intently, nodding occasionally. He was getting a glimpse into the daily realities faced by his frontline staff. He knew the executive reports and the customer satisfaction surveys, but this personal account held a different kind of weight. After a moment of thoughtful silence, Alistair spoke again. "Clara, what you did was unacceptable. There's no getting around that. Physical contact with a passenger in that manner is a serious breach of conduct." His tone was firm now, leaving no room for misinterpretation. Clara's head drooped slightly. "I understand, Mr. Blackwood." But then, Alistair continued, his tone softening slightly. "However, I also recognize that people make mistakes, especially when under pressure. Your immediate remorse and your honesty now suggest that this was an isolated incident, a lapse in judgment rather than a reflection of your usual professionalism." Clara looked up, a glimmer of hope flickering in her eyes. Alistair leaned forward slightly. "Tell me, Clara, in your opinion, what would be a fair resolution to this situation?" He wanted to gauge her own understanding of the gravity of her actions and her willingness to take responsibility. Clara hesitated again, then spoke slowly and thoughtfully. "I believe I should face some form of disciplinary action. Perhaps a suspension. And I would certainly benefit from further training in stress management and conflict resolution. What I did was wrong, and I need to ensure it never happens again." Her answer was measured, showing a clear understanding of her accountability. Alistair nodded, a hint of something unreadable in his eyes. "That's a thoughtful response, Clara. Thank you for your honesty." He paused, then reached into his inner jacket pocket, pulling out a small, unassuming business card. He handed it to her. Clara took the card, her brow furrowed slightly as she read the name. Alistair Blackwood, Chief Executive Officer, Global Air. The realization hit her like a physical blow. The man she had slapped, the seemingly ordinary passenger, was her boss. Her boss. The weight of the badge she wore suddenly felt infinitely heavier. Her breath hitched in her throat, and the color drained from her face once more. The implications of her actions suddenly became monumental. This wasn't just an incident with a passenger. It was an incident with the person who ran the entire airline. The small, crisp business card felt like a lead weight in Clara's trembling hand. The elegant font, the simple yet powerful title, Chief Executive Officer, seemed to burn into her consciousness. Her eyes darted from the card back to Alistair, her mind struggling to reconcile the composed man sitting beside her with the towering figure who helmed the vast global air empire. A wave of nausea washed over her, the initial fear of disciplinary action now compounded by an overwhelming sense of mortification. She had not just made a mistake, she had potentially committed a career-ending blunder with the most powerful person in the company. Mr. Blackwood?" she stammered, her voice barely audible. Her carefully constructed composure had completely dissolved, replaced by a palpable panic. Alistair regarded her with a calm that bordered on serene. "Yes, Clara? I had no idea," she whispered, her gaze fixed on the business card as if it held the key to her immediate future, or lack thereof. I would never, if I had known. The sentence trailed off, the unspoken implications hanging heavily in the air. Alistair nodded slowly. I understand. I often travel incognito. It allows me to experience our services firsthand, without the usual fanfare. His explanation was matter-of-fact, but it did little to alleviate Clara's distress. But I slapped you, she said, the words sounding absurd even to her own ears. The sheer audacity of her action, now viewed through the lens of Alistair's true identity, was staggering. Alistair remained unperturbed. Indeed you did. And as we discussed, that is unacceptable. Clara braced herself, expecting the inevitable. So, what happens now? She asked, her voice laced with a mixture of fear and resignation. Alistair paused for a moment, his gaze thoughtful. What happens now, Clara, depends on a few things. He leaned forward slightly, his tone becoming more direct. Firstly, I appreciate your honesty and your willingness to take responsibility. That speaks volumes. Clara looked at him, a flicker of surprise amidst her anxiety. Secondly, Alistair continued, my goal isn't simply to punish. It's to understand. Your reaction, while wrong, suggests that there might be underlying issues that need addressing within Global Air. You mentioned being short-staffed, dealing with difficult situations. These are things I need to be aware of. Clara stared at him, a dawning sense of disbelief beginning to mix with her apprehension. Was the CEO of a major airline truly more interested in understanding the root cause than in immediate retribution? So, Alistair said, his eyes holding hers, here's what I propose. You mentioned further training in stress management and conflict resolution. I will personally ensure you receive the best available training. Furthermore, upon our arrival in New York, I would like you to accompany me. I want to hear more about your experiences, the challenges you and your colleagues face on a daily basis. Clara was stunned. This was not the reprimand she had expected. You want me to come with you? She asked, her voice filled with disbelief. Alistair nodded. Yes. I believe this incident, as unfortunate as it was, can be an opportunity. An opportunity for me to gain a deeper understanding of the realities faced by our cabin crew, and perhaps an opportunity for you to contribute to positive change within the company. Clara was speechless for a moment, her mind reeling. This was an outcome she could never have predicted. I don't know what to say, Mr. Blackwood. She finally managed, her voice thick with emotion. Thank you? For not immediately firing me. Alistair offered a small, almost imperceptible smile. My aim isn't to create a climate of fear, Clara. It's to foster an environment where everyone can perform their best. Sometimes that means looking beyond a mistake and understanding what led to it. He then added, his tone becoming slightly more serious. However, let me be clear. What happened was still wrong. There will be a formal review of this incident. But your willingness to take responsibility and my desire to understand the broader context will both be taken into account. Clara nodded, a wave of relief washing over her, mixed with a renewed sense of responsibility. This wasn't a free pass, but it was an unexpected chance. A chance to learn, to grow, and perhaps even to make a difference. The remainder of the flight passed in a somewhat surreal atmosphere. Clara returned to her duties, performing them with a newfound sense of focus and a quiet humility. Alistair returned to his reading, though occasionally his gaze would drift towards Clara, a thoughtful expression on his face. The other passengers, unaware of the identity of the man involved, likely assumed the matter had been dealt with discreetly. As the plane began its descent into New York, Alistair turned to Clara. Are you still willing to speak with me after we land? Clara met his gaze, a newfound resolve in her eyes. Yes, Mr. Blackwood. I am. The weight of the badge still felt significant, but now it was accompanied by a glimmer of hope and a sense of unexpected purpose. The CEO's gambit had begun. Upon landing at JFK, as the other passengers began to disembark, Alistair gestured for Clara to wait. She stood slightly apart, a mix of nervousness and anticipation churning within her. The controlled chaos of deplaning swirled around them, but in their immediate vicinity, an unspoken understanding had formed. Once the majority of passengers had exited, Alistair rose and indicated for Clara to follow him. He didn't lead her towards the public areas of the airport, but instead through a discreet door marked "Authorized personnel only." This led to a quieter corridor, the walls lined with framed photographs celebrating Global Air's history. Clara found herself walking alongside the CEO, a situation she could never have imagined just a few hours earlier. They arrived at a comfortable, yet functional, office within the airline's terminal operations. Alistair gestured towards a chair. "Please have a seat, Clara." She sat, her posture still a little stiff. Alistair settled into the chair opposite her, the usual commanding presence he exuded in corporate settings softened by a genuine interest in their conversation. "So," he began, his tone conversational, "tell me more about the challenges you and your colleagues face. Don't hold back. I want to hear the unvarnished truth." Clara took a deep breath. The initial fear of immediate repercussions had subsided, replaced by a sense of an unexpected opportunity to be heard. She spoke candidly about the pressures of the job, the increasing passenger loads, sometimes with reduced crew, the frustration of dealing with issues outside their control, like delays in baggage handling, and the emotional toll of constantly having to be cheerful and helpful, even when personally stressed or dealing with difficult individuals. She recounted instances of feeling rushed, of not having enough time to properly address passenger concerns, and the underlying anxiety of knowing that a single misstep could lead to complaints and disciplinary action. She even touched upon the sometimes inadequate communication between ground staff and cabin crew, which could lead to confusion and frustration on board. Alistair listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions, his expression thoughtful. He didn't interrupt or dismiss her concerns. For Clara, it was a surprisingly cathartic experience. She had often felt that the daily struggles of the cabin crew went unnoticed by those in the higher echelons of the company. Here was the CEO himself, listening attentively to her experiences. As Clara spoke, Alistair made mental notes. He realized that while he received regular reports on operational efficiency and customer satisfaction, these often lacked the human element, the on-the-ground perspective of his frontline employees. Clara's account was painting a more nuanced and, at times, concerning picture. After Clara had spoken for some time, sharing various anecdotes and observations, Alistair leaned back in his chair. "Thank you, Clara," he said sincerely. "This has been very insightful. I appreciate your honesty." He paused, then continued. "The incident on the plane was unacceptable, and there will be a formal review. However, your willingness to speak openly about these broader issues, and your remorse for your actions, have made a significant impact on my perspective." Clara waited, unsure of what to expect next. "I believe," Alistair said, "that you have a valuable perspective to offer. You are on the front lines, interacting with our passengers every day. You see things that I, in my office, do not." He then made an unexpected proposition. "Clara, how would you feel about being part of a task force? A group dedicated to improving the working conditions and overall experience for our cabin crew? Your insights from today, and your ongoing experience, could be invaluable." Clara was taken aback. From fearing for her job to being offered a role in shaping the company's future, the shift was almost unbelievable. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, her voice filled with a mixture of surprise and gratitude. I would be honored." Alistair nodded. "Good. We can discuss the specifics later. For now, I want you to know that I value your perspective. What happened on the plane was a mistake, but I believe you have the potential to contribute positively to Global Air." He then addressed the incident itself more directly. "There will be a formal record of what happened. Given your immediate remorse, your cooperation, and my belief that this was an isolated incident fueled by stress, the disciplinary action will reflect that. You will be required to undergo additional training in stress management and conflict resolution, as you yourself suggested. There will also be a temporary suspension without pay. However, this will not be a termination of your employment." Relief washed over Clara in a powerful wave. She had expected far worse. "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood. Thank you for this opportunity. I won't let you down." Alastair stood. "I believe you won't. Now, I have some calls to make. Sarah will ensure you get back to the crew hotel. We will be in touch regarding the training and the task force." As Clara left the office, her mind was still reeling from the unexpected turn of events. She had gone from the brink of losing her career to being offered a chance to help improve it for others. The slap, the shocking revelation of Alastair's identity, and the subsequent conversation had opened up a path she could never have foreseen. The consequences of her actions were still real, but so was the unexpected opportunity for growth and contribution. The journey beyond the cabin walls had just begun. The immediate aftermath of the flight and the meeting with Alastair was a whirlwind for Clara. The temporary suspension was difficult, a stark reminder of her impulsive action. The days away from work were filled with a mix of shame and a burgeoning sense of purpose. She used the time to reflect on what had happened, not just her own lapse in judgment, but also the systemic pressures she and her colleagues faced. The mandated stress management and conflict resolution training proved to be more beneficial than she had anticipated. It provided her with valuable tools and techniques for handling difficult situations and managing her own stress levels. She approached the training with a newfound seriousness, determined to learn from her mistake and ensure it never happened again. Meanwhile, within Global Air, whispers of the incident circulated, though the full details and the identity of the passenger involved remained largely unknown to most. Some crew members noted Clara's absence and speculated about the reasons. Sarah, who had witnessed the initial altercation, kept a discreet silence, respecting Alastair's handling of the situation. True to his word, Alastair's office contacted Clara shortly after her suspension ended, inviting her to the first meeting of the newly formed cabin crew task force. Stepping into the boardroom, Clara felt a wave of intimidation. She was surrounded by senior managers and executives, individuals who usually operated in a different stratosphere from her daily work life. However, Alastair's presence was reassuring. He greeted her warmly and made it clear that her perspective was highly valued. "Clara," he said to the room, "brings a crucial frontline experience to this discussion. Her insights into the daily realities faced by our cabin crew will be invaluable as we work towards creating a better environment for everyone." During the meeting, Clara spoke with a newfound confidence. She shared her experiences, echoed the concerns she had voiced to Alastair, and offered practical suggestions for improvement. She talked about the need for better staffing levels on certain routes, clearer communication protocols, and more robust support systems for crew members dealing with difficult passengers. To her surprise, her input was not only heard but actively solicited. The executives around the table listened attentively, asked follow-up questions, and seemed genuinely interested in understanding the challenges she outlined. Clara realized that Alastair's decision to involve her was not just a gesture. He truly wanted to effect change based on the experiences of his employees. Over the following weeks, the task force met regularly. Clara became a strong advocate for her colleagues, voicing concerns and proposing solutions based on her own experiences and those shared by other flight attendants. She found a sense of empowerment in being able to contribute to decisions that would directly impact the lives of her fellow crew members. Alastair, for his part, actively participated in the task force meetings, often guiding the discussions and ensuring that Clara's voice was heard. He implemented several of the task force's initial recommendations, demonstrating his commitment to taking their feedback seriously. Small but significant changes began to be implemented: adjustments to staffing on particularly demanding flights, clearer guidelines for handling passenger complaints, and the introduction of peer support programs for cabin crew. The ripple effect of the unexpected slap was beginning to spread throughout Global Air. An incident born out of stress and misjudgment had inadvertently become a catalyst for positive change. Clara, once facing potential dismissal, was now playing a pivotal role in shaping the future of the airline's cabin crew operations. Her relationship with Alastair evolved into one of mutual respect. He saw in her not just the flight attendant who had made a mistake, but a dedicated employee with valuable insights. Clara, in turn, saw beyond the powerful CEO to a leader who was willing to listen and learn from all levels of his company. The story of the slap remained a closely held secret between them and a few key individuals. For the wider company, the positive changes being implemented were simply seen as a new initiative to improve employee satisfaction and passenger experience. Clara, though still bearing the memory of her impulsive action, began to move forward with a renewed sense of purpose. She continued her duties as a flight attendant, but now with the added responsibility and satisfaction of knowing she was also contributing to a larger effort to make things better for her colleagues. The unexpected turbulence had ultimately led to a smoother journey ahead, not just for Clara, but potentially for the entire Global Air cabin crew. Time moved forward, and the changes initiated by the cabin crew task force began to take root within Global Air. Staff morale among the flight attendants saw a noticeable uplift, fueled by the feeling of being heard and the tangible improvements in their working conditions. Passenger feedback also showed a gradual positive trend, perhaps a reflection of a more supported and engaged cabin crew. Clara continued to be an integral part of the task force, her voice carrying weight and her contributions valued. She had found an unexpected sense of fulfillment in advocating for her colleagues, turning a moment of personal crisis into an opportunity for collective betterment. While the memory of the slap never fully faded, it became less a source of shame and more a reminder of the extraordinary turn her life had taken. Her interactions with Alistair evolved into a professional camaraderie built on mutual respect. He would occasionally seek her direct feedback on new initiatives, valuing her on-the-ground perspective. Clara, in turn, admired his willingness to look beyond a mistake and his genuine commitment to understanding the human element within his vast organization. One day, Alistair called Clara to his office. It wasn't the same tense atmosphere of their first post-flight meeting. Instead, the tone was relaxed and appreciative. "Clara," he began, "the work you and the task force have done has been remarkable. We're seeing real positive changes, and a lot of that is down to your dedication and your honest insights." He then offered her a new role within Global Air, a position that would bridge the gap between the cabin crew and the management, focusing on employee relations and experience for the in-flight teams. It was a significant promotion, one that recognized her leadership potential and her deep understanding of the challenges faced by her colleagues. Clara was deeply moved. From a moment that could have ended her career to being offered a chance to shape the very culture of the airline she worked for was an ascent she had never imagined. She accepted the role with gratitude and a renewed sense of commitment. The story of the unaware flight attendant who slapped the airline CEO remained an internal anecdote, a testament to an unconventional approach to leadership and the unexpected paths that understanding and forgiveness can forge. Alistair's decision not to simply punish, but to understand and engage, had not only saved Clara's career but had also enriched his company. The incident served as a powerful reminder that even in the most hierarchical structures, human connection and empathy can lead to profound and positive change. The unexpected turbulence had ultimately guided both Clara and Global Air to a higher, more compassionate altitude. And so, while the initial act was born out of a moment of stress and misjudgment, the subsequent unfolding of events painted a story of redemption, opportunity, and the transformative power of seeing beyond a mistake to the person and the potential within. Clara's journey, from a moment of despair to a position of influence, became an inspiring, albeit unusual, chapter in the ongoing story of Global Air, a testament to the fact that sometimes, the most unexpected incidents can lead to the most meaningful altitudes. And that's the incredible story of how an unexpected moment of turbulence led to unforeseen heights. What did you think of this extraordinary turn of events? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more like it, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more captivating tales. Thanks for watching.